Hey, everybody, welcome back to Matt and Cheryl's Gen Excellent playlist. I'm Matt.
I'm Sheryl.
And it's 1980. We've reached the decade of the 1980s.
Yay!
Hey, it's been a minute. We've been away for a while. You know, life and work and all that stuff gets in the way sometimes, but glad to be back. And very exciting moving on to our next decade as we say farewell to the 70s, our last episode about Elton John's dominant decade of the 1970s. He would eventually revive his career in the 1980s, but a couple of years down the road, he did have a pretty good hit song in 1980, though, Little Genie. I don't know if I remember hearing Elton John songs as contemporary hits on the radio until Little Genie. And, you know, I was certainly familiar with his music as a kid, had a lot of the records, and my dad had the Greatest Hits album and all that. But I remember hearing Little Genie on the radio, and this, 1980 was the first full year that I was listening to contemporary top 40 hit music on FM radio. And I remember hearing Little Genie and think, doesn't sound like the same guy. His voice changed.
Yeah, he's singing in the lower register
Right.
now.
Yeah.
And it does sound a lot different. I don't remember it at the time. I was just starting to get into the Beatles pretty soon, like in the next year or so, and that's all I listened to. So I really wasn't listening to contemporary radio.
So the Beatles became an obsession for you at a young age.
Yes, probably it was more like 1981. I listened to nothing but the Beatles for a couple years, really, until I was in like junior high. I was into music before that, but it was always just my mom's albums. Like it was basically John Denver, The Carpenters, Neil Diamond.
Housewife music.
Yes, exactly.
Not to denigrate any of those artists because they've all done great work, but
right.
But
and
yes,
I really still like a lot of their stuff too, but
Right.
I definitely was not venturing out beyond anything that was just already in our house. And anything I was hearing on the radio, there were certainly songs that I remember and, really liked. And we kind of talked about this last time too. I wasn't going out and buying albums. I liked singles and there were songs I really liked from the radio. And you mentioned that too. Like there were, bands you were really into, but you weren't going out and buying their full albums. And I wasn't either.
1980 would have been the year I became a music consumer, though, buying singles.
Part of this too is that I didn't get my own stereo until I think 1981 or 82. So once I got like an actual stereo that had a record player and a cassette player, then I started buying albums. So I didn't really have anything to listen to in my room. I was just listening to the family record player that's like a piece of furniture, that you have in the living room. And so that totally changed my world when I got an actual stereo. And I think it was for my birthday in 1982.
I think 82 probably was when I got my first stereo too. It was all-in-one sound design. So it had the record table, cassette deck, 8-track player, all-in-one. And then started making tapes and away we go. But yeah, 1980, I would have been listening to my records on the little Magnavox in my room, or I guess occasionally on the stereo system in the family room of the house. But yes, 1980 is a pivotal year as I become a music consumer, first full year of being an avid listener of contemporary pop music on the radio. And then I remember at the end of the year, I started keeping track of the weekly top 10. I distinctly remember when I started doing that, Just Like Starting Over by John Lennon was the number one song. And we will certainly talk about John Lennon. When you look at 1980, the key news from that year, the murder of John Lennon, obviously near the top of that list. December 8th, outside the Dakota apartment building in New York, Mark David Chapman gunned him down. And I think that was a month or so after the Double Fantasy album had been released.
Yeah.
And then Just Like Starting Over was already a hit single. And this was John Lennon emerging from hibernation. I mean, he had been completely invisible for about 5 years.
He was a house dad.
Yeah, raising the kid.
Raising his son, Sean. The last time that he had really been in the spotlight at all was with Elton John. That live performance at Madison Square Garden after Whatever Gets You Through the Night hit number one.
So question for you, the Beatle fanatic. Did your obsession with the Beatles begin after his murder? Were you already heading down that road?
It was not until 1981 that I was really first introduced to the Beatles. I do remember, when John Lennon was shot. I mean, it was huge news.
Yeah. Can you remember hearing the news the first time or where you were or anything like that?
Not really.
Yeah.
Can you?
Yeah. No, I remember hearing it on the car radio. And, I was already for a few years a big Paul McCartney and Wings fan. I knew way less about John Lennon. I didn't know his solo music at all. Obviously, I knew he was a Beatle, and it was a big deal that he was killed. But, I was a McCartney guy through and through. I didn't really know his music at all. Probably knew the song Imagine or would have recognized that song. But most of his solo music would have been pretty foreign to me.
Oh, yeah. I didn't become familiar with John's solo music until much later. I was familiar with Paul's radio songs throughout the 70s just from hearing them on the radio.
Oh, I would have known at least a dozen McCartney and Wings songs.
Yeah.
And obviously I was aware of Just Like Starting Over, because I was listening to hit radio at that time. But I didn't really know much about his music.
I would definitely say that I'm a bigger fan of Paul's solo work than any of the other ex-Beatles. I think that John has some really great songs, but I think that it's harder to find a really good full album for him. Plastic Ono Band is the only one that is a 5-star album. Like, that is essential. But other than that, his albums, they have some really good songs on them, but they don't necessarily work all the way through as an album. I mean, obviously, Paul has a lot of that too, and we're going to be talking about that today. But he's also has a much bigger catalog because he was recording music all through the 70s when John wasn't.
So Paul McCartney had released his second true solo album in 1980, and that's going to be your selection for this episode, the hit single from that album coming up, which was a number one hit. You will also be talking about John Lennon down the line for 1980 as well, but not in this episode. My track, there's some similarities here in these two songs. So coming up, the studio version on the A side actually got flipped in the United States, and the B side became the hit, which was a live recording of Coming Up in Glasgow, which doesn't make it a true solo McCartney, but it's the contemporary Wings lineup that plays on that. Far superior version of the song, honestly, I think. I don't think there's any comparison. My song, which is one of the biggest global hits of that year, number one in 28 countries, sold over 35 million records worldwide. And this is a year after Disco Demolition at Comiskey Park. Disco isn't totally dead yet, but it's changed. It's morphing into something else. And this song's representative of that. It's Funkytown by Lips Inc. So similarities between these two. The McCartney 2 album is almost all Paul playing all the instruments, doing all the vocals. Lip Sync is basically one guy doing all the music of the production with incredible guest vocal. It's not guest vocals. She was actually part of the group Lip Sync. Her name's Cynthia Johnson, a name that should probably be better known because she just knocked it out of the park with the vocals on this song. Funkytown is a song I didn't like at all when it was a hit. I didn't like it. I'm not a fan at all. So it's only a song that I really came to appreciate and enjoy later on in life. There's a few examples of that from 1980. The Pretenders' Brass in Pocket. Didn't like that song. Now I love it. Pink Floyd, Another Brick in the Wall. Hated that when I was a kid. Now it's great.
You didn't like pop music either. Pop music.
Right. Yeah. Didn't like that one either. Now I can appreciate that. Most of the songs I loved when I was a kid, I still love today. There's very few where I go back and was like, man, what was I thinking? My tastes really were pretty well established at that time, and they've only broadened since. They haven't narrowed. So taking in a lot of songs that maybe I didn't appreciate or didn't get at the time and now do. But I don't have a lot of songs where or like embarrassing periods in my life where I look back and think, oh, Jesus. There were maybe a few fashion choices at the turn of the 90s that I regret, but
everybody's had those. There's no way you could not have those if we grew up in the 80s or the 90s.
It's so funny. Our generation really venerates the 80s, and I've always loved the 70s. And as a kid in the 80s, as a high schooler in the 80s, the perception was, oh God, the 70s, just decade of bad taste, horrible fashions. I think the fashions of the 80s are so much worse in retrospect, in my opinion.
We also have to remember, too, I think in Washington, we were really behind the times.
Oh,
I remember we were wearing bell bottoms still and stuff like that, where it was so uncool in other parts of the country.
In 1980 and 81, designer jeans were such a big, and they were still bell bottoms in Chehalis.
Yeah, same in Auburn.
Yeah,
but not in other parts of the country. But I remember not knowing that it wasn't cool until my cousins or somebody who lived on the East Coast were like, you guys are still wearing bell bottoms? And I was like, well, yeah, aren't you? They're like, no, we haven't worn those since the 70s. I'm like, oh, okay. Aside from grunge, which we kind of created just because that's just how people dress because they didn't care what they looked like. There's never been a fashion trend that has either started or followed in the Pacific Northwest that is popular or contemporary with the times.
No, nothing before or since. Honestly,
No.
it's a good point. So John Lennon's murder is big news. Obviously, the Iran hostage crisis was dominating the news and certainly affected the presidential election that fall. You know, we were in the wake of 3 Mile Island. Of sports news, the Winter Olympics, the U.S. hockey team beating Russia. These are some of the big signposts of the year 1980. Biggest hit movie by a landslide was The Empire Strikes Back, the first Star Wars sequel. And one
The
of the
best
few
Star Wars movie, as far as I'm
yes,
concerned.
a lot of people consider that to be the best one. And that's one of the few examples where a sequel, in a lot of people's minds, not mine, I still have a soft spot for the first one, but one of the few examples where a sequel is perceived to have bettered the original. I can't think of too many movie examples like that.
Yeah.
Which is funny because we just got home from watching the latest Indiana Jones movie, which is actually really good, very entertaining.
But those are much later sequels, so I consider that like a whole new portion of the movie. The original 3 that came out closer to each other and in the 80s.
Right.
The sequel, the second one, so dumb. It's like the dumbest movie.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember now. The lead actress in that movie was Kate Capshaw, and she was horrible. Wasn't she like sleeping with Steven Spielberg or something? There was some sort of.
Aren't they married? I thought that's his wife.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know who he's married.
Yeah, I think they still are. And I just remember there being this one scene where they're in the cave and they're wearing like these like voodoo kind of masks and they're doing this ritual with fire. It was so cheap. I mean, it looked like it could have been the Brady Bunch Hawaii episode. You know, like it could have been like part of that. That's how cheesy it was.
There were some good set pieces in that movie and some impressive special effects. But yeah, it was definitely a disappointment after Raiders of the Lost Ark, which was one of the all-time great movies.
Oh, yeah.
That's interesting that we bring that up, too, because Beatle Paul, Linda, is a constant companion, and she is involved in everything he does. But was she involved?
Whether we like it or not.
Right. Did she do anything on McCartney too? Did she have any input there or any vocal or instrumental input on that album, or is it just all Paul?
It's all Paul. Although I kind of wonder in Coming Up where it has that backup vocal, what sounds like a really high pitch coming up, if that's her. I don't know. Should we talk about that now?
Yeah, we could talk about that.
Okay. So, in 1979, Paul had just come off Back to the Egg, which was a critical and commercial failure.
It's been reevaluated since, and I think it's held in much higher regard. But I remember at the time it was not well received.
I don't know, honestly, if it is held in much higher regard now, because I still don't think it's a very good album. I think that it has 2 really good singles, which is very much how a lot of Paul's solo career has gone. Yeah. He's got 2 really good singles on an album and filler that doesn't live up to the standards of those singles. And Back to the Egg falls in that category. Everything was very mediocre. And, I think he was just burned out, too. I think he was ready to be done with Wings. They did a tour in 79, and that's where the live Coming Up was actually recorded in 79 on that tour. So he had already written that song, and I think he maybe had some other stuff written at the time. So they finish out this tour, and he's kind of like, I'm ready for a change. I'm done with Wings. But then they decide that they're going to do a tour of Japan. And he actually had not been to Japan since the Beatle days because he was not able to get a visa to travel there because he had actually been busted 3 times for drugs. One was in 1972, he was smuggling hashish into Sweden, had like a $2,000 fine or something. And then in 73, he was arrested for pot possession in Scotland and found that he was growing cannabis on his property. So he already had a record. So he wasn't allowed to go to Japan. They wouldn't give him a visa. Finally, he had become eligible for a visa. And they booked this Japanese tour. The whole thing is sold out. I mean, the fans are just like so thrilled that he's coming there because he hasn't been there since, I think 1965 when the Beatles toured there.
Right. And I think they played Budokan, right? And
yes.
Isn't that one of the better live recordings of the Beatles too?
It is. Yeah. And especially because you can actually hear them. So they get to the customs and, he walks up and he like plops his bag down. All of a sudden the custom agent opens the bag. And what does he find? But a bag of 0.5 pound of pot. Now, I don't really know. I'm not good at like measurements and stuff. So I looked up, I'm like, how much is that? It's like a Ziploc bag full.
That's a lot. That's a lot of weight. It's a lot of weight. Yeah.
And he just has it casually thrown in his bag, just like you would your underwear and your deodorant. Clearly, this is an issue. It was such a large amount that they actually were considering having to try him for smuggling.
Right.
Like he had to convince them, no, this is actually all just for me. I'm not planning on selling it. I mean, everybody already knows he's a total pothead and has been forever, but come on, Paul. You also know that it's illegal.
This was huge news at the time. I remember it clearly. Yeah, it was all over the news. Yeah.
And this is January of 1980. Okay, this is how Paul starts the new decade.
Because it's looking like they throw him in jail and it's looking like he's going to be there.
He was in jail for 9 days.
Yeah, but I mean.
It could have been 7 years.
Right. There was a threat of a long-term jail sentence.
Yes. So he actually did go to jail. And of course, they had to cancel the tour. Fans are so disappointed and it just does not look good at all. So this is how Paul starts 1980. Now, at this point, Wings really was about ready to dissolve anyway. And he takes this as a sign, I guess, to go to his farm in Scotland and just kind of lock himself away. This whole thing is so mind-boggling to me. I went back and watched a bunch of interviews and listened to interviews and just tried to glean what was he thinking? I can't quite come up with a theory except that either he so did not want to tour with Wings again that he decided it'd be better to be in a Japanese prison for 7 years. I don't know. Or he's just such a pothead that he was just either so out of his head that he didn't know what he was doing or he just didn't care. I don't know of any other time where somebody so famous has done something so blatantly stupid like that. So anyway, I don't know. I can't get from Paul or anybody else why this happened. It did force him to go off by himself. So in that time, well, actually, this isn't true. I'm sorry. I shouldn't say that because this whole thing happened after he had already gone. He had already written and recorded a bunch of these songs that eventually became the songs for McCartney too. And pretty much what he did is he just rented a 16-track recorder, brought it up to his house, and he just plugged directly right into it and just started making weird sounds on synthesizers. And eventually started kind of playing around with the songs some more, mixing, doing different things. He says that he made this to just be for his own listening pleasure. I just want to pop in a cassette while I'm driving around the country and I might want to listen to some of my own little tunes that I just wrote. I heard him say this on several interviews, but then I played it for my friends and they decided this should be your new album. And I'm like, Paul, come on. You're only saying this because you know that when these are contemporary interviews from when it came out or right before. You're only saying this because you know that if the public is what the hell are you doing? Then you have an excuse and you can say, oh, well, I was never intending on putting this out. This was just going to be for my own pleasure. And, my friends made me do it.
Paul has he's got this knack in interviews of coming off as just down to earth, unguarded, just regular guy, but he really is very guarded. He doesn't offer you much.
Yeah, it's true. And he is coming from that place where he doesn't want to fully take responsibility for what he's doing. And so, in fact, his entire career with Wings is like that. Oh, I'm just going to get together a bunch of friends and we're just going to just play some songs and we're just going to we're not expecting it to be anything. We're just going to just hang out and have fun.
And, and if that's his coping mechanism for fame, I'll give the guy credit because, I mean, are there many more famous people in the world than Paul McCartney or have been for decades on end? I mean, for 60 years or whatever it is, that level of fame. If that's how he copes with it and stays sane, and he's done a pretty good job of that.
He has. And it really does kind of make sense, too, because he wanted the antithesis of what the Beatles were. Yeah. He wanted it to be just on his own terms, very laid back, nothing that he felt like he had a responsibility to do. Because, these four guys, well, maybe not Ringo so much, but definitely John and Paul and George to a certain extent, the expectations are beyond what any other musician would ever have had at that time. And that is a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
So I don't blame him for doing that. I think, like you said, it did keep him sane and it did keep him in a state where he could just continue to make music and write a lot of great songs. I mean, he ended up having a very successful career with this too.
Just the year before McCartney 2 was released, Guinness World Records had a ceremony honoring him as like the most successful composer in history. I think they'd cataloged 43 different songs, including the Beatles and solo, that were number one or million plus sellers.
Yeah,
and gave him
that's
some award.
amazing.
Yeah,
And half of that career, he wasn't even trying, you know?
that's right.
So when McCartney 2 was released, it was a big shock to fans. There's been very few times where somebody of that caliber has put something out like this as an official album.
Yeah.
One of the things I could compare this to is like Pete Townsend's Scooped, another Scoop, Scoop 3, which are basically albums that he put out, but they're all just like demos. And just him messing around in his own home recorder and his own studio.
I've never listened to those.
And there's some really cool stuff on those. And there's a lot of songs on those that were never released in any other form with the Who or solo. It's kind of exactly what McCartney 2 is. But he put it out under the guise of, these are my demos. This is just for fun. Paul didn't do that. He put this out like, this is my next album. Now, I guess anybody who was familiar with McCartney 1, his first solo album, which was recorded in the same way, not with synthesizers, but recorded at home. He plays all the instruments himself. It is really similar. And he titled it McCartney 2. So there is a natural progression that this is like volume 2 of that, which makes sense. But honestly, I mean, pretty much every album of his, except maybe Band on the Run, possibly like Venus and Mars, there are songs that really do sound like they could just be demos. They're very raw, they're not polished. And there's also some songs that are very whimsical and just kind of silly, like Uncle Albert, which actually became a hit for him, but that's a great example of that. So this album really isn't that far out of character for Paul, but it definitely does not feel like something that an artist of his caliber would have in their catalog, especially this late in his career. McCartney 1, okay, that was his first solo album, and we knew that he was kind of just sheltering up in the hills in Scotland to do that. At the time when this came out, it was totally panned. People thought he just had gone off the deep end, basically. I totally understand why.
Yeah.
A lot of the songs are just, some of them are so strange. It's very synthesized. It's, synthesizers at this time, like we've talked about before, are still fairly new. And there's really not a lot of people that are just like fully embracing albums where that's the main instrument. But he also plays drums on this. He does play guitar, bass. There's a few songs there's one song in particular that's kind of a bluesy kind of guitar song. But you talked about Back to the Egg kind of going back in retrospect and people finding a new love for it. This album, I think of all of his albums, has had that happen more than any others, where people have gone back and thought, this is actually pretty cool. There's a lot of people that have sampled stuff from this album, and people see it as an early use of synthesizers and home recording DIY.
Yep. There was the whole lo-fi movement and alternative American music. Yeah.
Now, I wouldn't deny that that's all true, but I definitely think that Paul did it by accident. I do not think that Paul went into this thinking that, I've got this thing here that I think is going to become like the next big thing and that people are going to...
Cutting edge trendsetter me. Look at this. Yeah.
No. I think that anything that came about later, praise of this album, was just purely accident. And honestly, I think a lot of Paul's career is like that. It's just kind of an accident.
And honestly, a lot of his albums have undergone critical reappraisal because most of his albums contemporaneously were not well received by music critics. I mean, he dealt with that almost throughout from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. So my song choice is coming up. And like you mentioned, there's two versions of the song. The original version that's on the album that was released as a single in the UK and reached, I think, number 6, sounds much different than the live version because it does have drums. Paul plays drums. Well, actually, there's bass too. And then the rest is just kind of sounds like horns, but it's actually a synthesizer that he's using to make, those sounds. It's much more simplified and basic than primitive the live version. Yeah. The bass line is really just simple and kind of plodding, and the vocals. Now, one thing he does with the vocals is he uses this Speed machine that actually like speeds up the vocals, so they just sound off. Like they're a little bit high pitched, and especially the backup part, the coming up, like that sounds really.
I remember Because both got played on the radio. I remember that clearly. I remember when it first came out, you were hearing the studio version on the radio, and then at a certain point, you were hearing this different version, which was the live version.
Which was recorded with Wings.
Yeah.
In 1979, since the live version was actually recorded by Wings, and more than just Wings, it has actual horns. It has a really cool, funky bass line that you do not hear on the original. And the thing that I really like the most about the live version is Paul's vocals sound so cool. He's got that raspiness to his voice, and it just has so much more of like a groove to it, like the whole song
absolutely.
does.
The funky guitar is just infectious. The horn lines are great. I mean, everything about it. It's just very uplifting and catchy.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think that the studio version is just kind of like a sterilized version of what you hear in the live version. Now, I will say there's one format that I do enjoy the studio version, and that's the music video.
Yes.
So the only time I listen to it in that way is when I watch the music video, which is actually really fun. And, of course, this came out pre-MTV, and Paul plays, aside from Linda, she's like the backup singers, but he plays every person in the band. And he plays different characters. And the band is called the Plastic Max, which is a take on the Plastic Ono band, John Lennon's band. And there's even a Beatle Paul. And I love that part in the video because he does the woo, coming up, woo. And it's perfect because he does the little head shake and he's wearing this collarless suit and playing his Hofner bass.
How many American fans who saw that video would have picked up on him doing one of the guys from Sparks?
Ron Mayle from Sparks. I don't think very many people would, but I think now that's one of the things that people look back on and say, oh,
yeah,
and
pretty
he
hip.
says too, he was influenced by Sparks, and there's proof right there because they were pretty underground still, and definitely in the U.S. In the UK,
a lot
they
better
were
known
popular.
in England. Yeah.
Yeah.
American duo, but much more popular in England. Yeah.
Yes. And he's such a recognizable figure with his little kind of Hitler mustache and his slick back hair.
American fans might have thought he was actually playing Hitler in the video.
Maybe. Yeah, because they certainly wouldn't see that and go, oh, that's Ron Mayle from Sparks. Yeah.
Right.
And then the drummer's got these big mutton chop sideburns on, and supposedly it's kind of a take on John Bonham, although it looks nothing like him and he acts nothing like him in the video. But that's what I've read. And Hank Marvin on guitar.
Did Bonham play on Rockestra?
Yes.
Yeah.
He did. Which is also like, why? Why did you do that? It's so ridiculous. There's so many people on it. All of the faces, Pete Townsend, John Bonham.
Dana Gilmore.
Yes. Like a multitude of superstars are on this. And it's so basic and simple and just silly. But yeah, he did. In fact, he did a couple other songs. There's some demos that he did with John Bonham, too, that are bonus tracks on Back to the Egg, which are kind of interesting. But it's a really fun video. And actually, the first time that video debuted in the U.S. was on Saturday Night Live. Father Guido Sarducci going to his house, trying to get Paul to come out. And finally, he and Linda come out. It was like a pre-recorded thing that they played on the show. And they actually reference the whole Tokyo situation and his arrest. Just like a very awkward, weird thing.
So I watched a couple of things on YouTube. He did an interview with Musician Magazine. It was put out on a LP. It's a really good interview, but clearly there was a dictum there that they were not going to talk about the drug bust because that does not come in 50 minutes talking to Paul McCartney.
In
1980, they don't talk about the Tokyo bust at all. Coming up, it's another one of those songs that I only came to appreciate much later on. And I think part of the reason is because that studio version was my first exposure to it. And I remember thinking, what is this? And I remember my dad loved the Beatles like anybody else, but not the rock stuff. So he's more of a Paul McCartney Beatles guy.
Yeah.
And I remember his reaction was just, oh, God, yeah, what is this crap, Well,
it's really strange. I mean, it sounds nothing like anything he's ever done before, or even like I said, anybody of that caliber at that time. Because of all the songs on that album, Coming Up is the most actual song on that album. And even... and
Waterfalls.
Waterfalls was... Waterfalls was a single. But like Temporary Secretary, which was also a single, is so bizarre and strange, although I actually love it. But it's very weird.
Here's the other thing about Beatle Paul, just very likable, down to earth guy, good natured guy. But there's just, again, it's the era. There's this casual sexism, this casual racism. There's a song on there called Frozen Jap,
Frozen Jap,
for God's sake.
yeah.
And I think it's in the Geraldo interview, or one of the interviews he did around the time, where he's trying to explain how, well, at one time the Japanese people found that to be offensive, but now it's just it's not like other.
They don't anymore.
Yeah,
I heard that too. Like... And he's like, and in Japan we actually called it Frozen Japanese. So, we did change it for that. It's like, well, why didn't you just call it that for the whole thing?
Why would you name
why
a
would you
song
call it that at all?
I know.
And the really stupid thing about it has no lyrics. It's just an instrumental song. Why would it matter what it was called?
Oh, it's like, what motivated you to name this song?
I don't know. It makes no sense. I mean, a lot of what Paul was doing at this time made no sense. Really.
But
it really didn't.
But you forgive him because there's no mean-spiritedness behind it. It's just obliviousness, complete obliviousness.
Yes, it is. I guess there are other songs on the album that are more like actual songs. There's a few Waterfalls. There's another song on there that's a ballad that's actually a real song. But then there's just a bunch of snippets and weird stuff. Yeah. But coming up on the album version, what makes it so strange is the vocals and like how the vocals are manipulated, because the basis of the song is still there, just like it is in the live version. There's a quote too from John at the time, and it's funny too to think back that when John was still alive, that they would ask each Beatle, what did you think of Paul's new album? Or, what do you think of what Ringo's doing right now? And so John says, well, he actually really loved the album version of Coming Up. He was living in the US at the time, and that's where they flipped the single and they were playing the live version. And he was like, if I would have been there with him, I would have said, yep, you released the album version. That's the one.
And wrong, John. I'm pretty sure this is how it went down. I think when they first started playing that song on the radio, it was the studio version. And then somewhere along the line, it changed.
Well, the studio version was a hit in the UK.
Yeah.
And it was in the US that they flipped it. And actually, Columbia wanted to release the live version on the album, but Paul wouldn't let them because the album is a solo album and the live version is Wings. Yeah. So what they did is in the US, they added a 7-inch promo copy of the song as a bonus with the album. Have you ever listened to the albums that Paul put out under the name The Fireman?
Yes. The Strawberries, Ocean Ships, Forest. I had that on CD. Yeah.
Okay. So he had 2 albums that he did in the 90s.
Haven't heard the
collaboration with Youth, who was the bassist for the band Killing Joke, and he was also a producer. The ones that he made in the 90s are very much like ambient, instrumental, kind of, or even like house music. Then he had one that came out in 2008 called The Electric Arguments. That is the lost Paul McCartney gem.
Really?
It is so good. And it's a pop album. It has a few tracks that are instrumental, but most of it is just like great pop songs. Anyway, he continued to kind of have that interest in this type of thing. And that started with McCartney too. So personally, I think the live version is one of his best songs. It's so catchy.
Yeah.
It's so simple. And Paul himself will even say, I am not about lyrics. I write the music first, the lyrics come last. It's pretty obvious, if you're a Paul McCartney fan, that is true. But it really doesn't matter because this song, it's very simple, but it just has such a groovy bass line. It's super catchy. It's so sing-alongable. It has a great chorus. It's one of those songs that is like the chorus makes the song. And that little part, coming up like a flower, like that is freaking brilliant. Okay. I don't care how simple it is. It's brilliant.
So on that note of simplicity, that certainly applies to my song choice. And again, another song that I disliked at the time. It was a hit, and it was a huge hit. It was number 1 for a full month in the spring of 1980. And like I said, number 1 in 28 different countries, 35 million singles sold. Certainly a one-hit wonder. The group is called Lips Inc. It's Lipps and then INC period.
Lip sync?
Little pun on lip sync. It's basically 2 people. So the mastermind behind the music is a guy named Steven Greenberg. He's from the Twin Cities, and I'm not talking about Chehalis and Centralia, Washington. We're talking about Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota. Obviously, for people of our generation, when you hear Minnesota music, you think of a bunch of different artists. I mean, you probably go to Prince first. Maybe you think about the punk rock that was coming out of the Twin Cities, Husker Du, Soul Asylum, Replacements. Maybe you think of The Time, Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. I mean, it's just a musical hotbed. But in 1980, there weren't no music coming out of the Twin Cities. So Steven Greenberg, Jewish guy, he's about 30. He's closing in on 30 when this song becomes a big hit. He'd been kicking around in music for a long time, son of a wealthy businessman. So in 1979-80, when things start taking off, Steven Greenberg is the spitting image of Larry David at that time. Now, if you remember the comedy show Fridays, Larry David, long before Seinfeld and Curb Your Enthusiasm, Larry David was a stand-up comedian, but then he was a cast member and writer on this ABC comedy skit show that went up not against Saturday Night Live. It was on Friday nights, not Saturdays, but same vein.
Which actually has some of the best musical performances you can find of the 80s.
Yeah, they were pretty hip in their
very hip. Yeah,
the bands they had on, and the humor was edgier than Saturday Night Live at the time. A lot of drug humor, a lot of edgy stuff. Now, if you remember Fridays, or if you've seen pictures of Larry David from this era, he's already well on the way to being bald.
Yes.
But the hair that he does have is dark, and it's big. It's big. Big frizzy hair just flying out of his head. And this guy is the spitting image of Larry David. That he's got these horn-rimmed glasses like Trevor Horn wore in the Buggles.
Yeah.
So he's this goofy-looking guy. But the other key component of lip sync is the female vocalist. Her name is Cynthia Johnson, and he recruited her specifically to sing on this track, Funkytown. Incredible vocal performance on this. She was a gigging musician, but she had a full-time job. She was a secretary, not a temporary secretary, Paul McCartney, but she was a secretary for a suburban police department. But prior to that, she'd been Miss Black Minnesota in 1976. So a striking woman, very talented singer. And the band she was singing with at the time was called Flight Time, Flyte, Time. They eventually became The Time. So this was, that group, the one that was affiliated with Prince, that included Jimmy Jam, Terry Lewis, Jesse Johnson, that group. She was singing with, yes, great band. So Steve Greenberg, he'd been messing around in music for years, played in different bands. He'd actually shopped around a demo years before with no success. He'd gone out to California and New York, realized he wasn't ready for it. But one of his ways of making cash, he had a mobile DJ service. So this is the disco era. So he's playing a lot of disco music, working weddings and parties and such, traveling around. He had a pretty sophisticated gear and setup. There's a funny story about one of his gigs was on Mackinac Island, which is in the Great Lakes. It's kind of a resort island, a tourist destination, and there's no cars. So it's very primitive. You take a ferry to it, I think. And then to get around, a lot of people get around in like horse and carriage. And there's like cobblestone street, at least at this time, it was like that. So he had some gig on Mackinac Island. So he's got all his DJ, and he's got a very sophisticated setup, all sorts of cutting edge electronic equipment. He takes a ferry out to Mackinac, and he's got to get to his gig in a friggin' horse and buggy going on these cobblestone streets. So all the gear is just getting rattled around, and it's all practically destroyed by the time he gets. So he's thinking, God, I gotta think of something else here. This just ain't making it.
I gotta get to the big city.
Right. So, he's playing a lot of disco music, and he's thinking to himself, I'm a musician. I can play different instruments. I can write one of these songs. God, these songs, a lot of these songs are so simple. I could do that better than a lot of these people. So he's bound and determined to make himself a disco record. He eventually gets the attention of Casablanca Records in Los Angeles. Now, if you know Casablanca, that's the home of Village People, Donna Summer. Of course, they first started making it with Kiss. The label almost went out of business until the Kiss live album, Alive, came out in 75, 76, whenever it was, and really rescued the label. But they were mainly known for dance music, disco and funk. Parliament, George Clinton was on that label as well. Neil Bogart was the head of the label. notorious partier, notorious cokehead. Actually, his Bogart wasn't his real last name, which is funny because the label's Casablanca. So Humphrey Bogart was his favorite actor. He's a Jewish guy. His name was Neil Bogatz or Bogatz, so he changed it to Bogart. Then the label's Casablanca. Anyhow, so he finds an ally there and gets signed to the label, cuts this song called Rocket, not like the Herbie Hancock. It's two different words, rock, it. Doesn't hit. Releases that in 79. But they like him enough to tell him, make a record. Go back home, make a record, bring us the record. So basically, he's got carte blanche. He's going to do this all himself. He's got nobody looking over his shoulder. He records it all in Minneapolis. So the next single is Funkytown, and he's got this germ of an idea. He kind of worked out this guitar riff, and then the lyric is kind of his feelings about the music scene in the Twin Cities and how it just wasn't happening and how he wanted to be somewhere else where the music was popping, like New York or LA. Gotta take myself to a town that's right for me. So he puts all these parts together. He does most of them himself, plays most, he's a multi-instrumentalist, guitar, bass, drums, keyboards, you name it. I don't think he plays the bass on Funkytown. You got a session player to play the bass. But all the keyboard parts, certainly, and the drums. He's a drummer first. Learn the other instruments later. But he wanted a strong female voice on this. He auditioned tons of different gals. None of them were really satisfying what he was looking for. And one of them said, hey, you need to look up this Cynthia Johnson. She's really good. And he says, it was kind of a weird deal. You just call this woman out of the blue that you've never met. Say, hey, I'm making this record. I think you might be good to sing on it. But it worked.
I've never had any hits or anything before this.
Nobody. He's nobody. This guy's nobody. So he gets her in, and wow, it's just a jaw-dropping vocal on this song. She's great. She's great, and the record doesn't make it without her contribution. This is kind of a little bit ahead of its time. You fast forward a decade, and you get stuff like Black Box, all these dance acts that cut music videos where they're these glamorous, gorgeous women on the videos, but they're not really the singers.
Yeah.
Like Martha Wash of the Weather Girls, notorious for singing on all these hit songs, but not being the one portrayed on the video.
Music Factory.
Right.
Everybody dance now.
Yes. Yes.
And it's really not her in the video. Yeah.
So in that respect, he's kind of ahead of his time. Although she's beautiful, so obviously she would, if music videos were a thing then, and they weren't, at least not in America yet, she certainly would have been featured.
But on the other hand, it's kind of behind the times. Like Studio 54 closed in February of 1980.
Right. Yes, he's still the flame of disco is still burning in Steve Greenberg's heart.
Yeah.
And this song is nominally disco, but it's also pointing forward because, a lot of the disco music that we've featured on our playlist so far, and I've talked about this multiple times, one of the things I loved about the great disco music of the mid and late 70s was the big band aspect, about how you had all these musicians involved, multiple guitarists, drummers, string players, horn sections.
Yeah,
it's all people playing musical instruments. Well, this is pointing to what dance music would become, which is more computerized, more mechanized. So he's very much involved with the technology and synthesizers. But it was even his own quote about this. It's like, it's so rudimentary, the parts on this. There's a lot of layered parts to it, but they're all very basic, very rudimentary. It's in the key of C, the most basic key of them all. And he says, any halfway competent 15-year-old musician would have no trouble playing these parts. I mean, it's simple.
Yes.
But as we know, and everybody should know, complexity is not a recipe for great music necessarily. I mean, some of the greatest music ever made is very simple and basic. And this fits the bill.
And this is one of the catchiest and stickiest songs ever.
And it starts with that one finger synth line.
Yes.
Beep, 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 beep. Beep, 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 beep. I mean, it's just so easy.
Everybody knows that. If you play that, everybody knows that's Funkytown.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But there's a lot of cool stuff happening in this song. He's using this, fairly cutting edge technology, processing the vocals. His vocals are all processed.
The
Hers are natural.
vocoder in the verses,
Right.
yeah, which is
Yeah.
basically like a precursor to a kind of auto tune,
Yes, exactly. But there's so many hooks. Before you get to the
Yes.
chorus, the descending line, talk about it, talk about it, talk about it, talk about it. Then it repeats, talk about, move it. And then the pause, the little electronic drums that keep setting you up. And then that guitar comes in.
Yes.
Bam, ba bam, ba won't you take me to
Funkytown?
the vocals just soar into the stratosphere. I mean, it is a brilliant dance track.
Yes.
And this really, I mean, it's not like a lot of the disco that have gone before, but it's dance music. It's made for the dance. It's made for that crowd. It's marketed to the disco crowd. It's on a disco label, Casablanca Records, so it certainly fits the disco bill.
And you can dance to it.
Oh, for certain. And it just skyrockets, and it's a massive hit globally. One of the biggest hits of the year. 4 weeks atop the American charts. There's no performance video to be seen for this because it's a studio outfit. It's just this guy who brought in this gal to sing this part, and then they would continue to collaborate because obviously she's a very talented vocalist. But, I've listened to other tracks, and, they're not bad, but there's just nothing with the magic of Funkytown.
It's very much like a lot of other disco albums, including like the Village People, where you've got the hits that are the ones that are going to have the longevity, and they're like instant hits. And then you kind of have the rest of it that sounds similar, but they're not made to be album acts.
No.
What they're made to be is like a 12-inch single with an extended version that's like 8 minutes long, which there is. The version that was on the album is like almost 8 minutes long. The single version was cut down to 4, but really, I mean, that's what it's made for. It's made for that 12-inch single that just kind of goes on for, as long as people can stand being out on the dance floor.
Yeah. And, Steven Greenberg was a smart cookie. He spun this music at all these parties. He saw what people dug. He saw what got them moving on the dance floor. Said, Jesus, I can do this. And he did it. And this is the kind of song that people want to hear at wedding parties, in the same kind of parties where you would have a mobile DJ come in and play records. This is the kind of crap that people want to hear and get them out of the dance floor.
This song has an everlasting life, really.
Well,
it's never going away.
Yeah, no, and he had some business acumen. Did old Stevie Greenberg? This song was licensed to death and continues to be so. And another arena in which he was on the cutting edge was in the field of litigation. He got himself a lawyer who was familiar with copyright law. There were changes in copyright law made in the late 70s that put a time limit on the amount of time that a record company could own copyright to a song master and reap the profits. So anything after 1978, according to this law, or change of the law in the late 70s, 35 years. And at the end of 35 years, the rights revert back to the artist. And he was the first to actually sue a record company trying to win termination rights for a copyrighted master.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really interesting that didn't happen until this late in the game.
Yeah, not until the mid-2010s.
Interesting.
Yeah. There's a great video of him on YouTube on a local morning show in the Twin Cities, contemporaneous with the song being a hit in 1980. And he's just this kind of self-effacing, aw shucks guy. I mean, he's obviously proud of what has happened, but he's like the cat that ate the canary. He's just Stevie.
What I did.
He's just Stevie Greenberg from Minneapolis, and look what it's almost like it's amusing to him, just the life that this song is.
Well, he found the perfect vocalist, and really that's what makes this song. The chorus and her vocals in the chorus, and just it's perfect, like funky R&B, just perfection.
Yeah.
And what makes it even more apparent, and when I listened to the original, is when I listened to the pseudo echo version, which was a hit in 1986, an Australian band that made a hit with this song, a remake. And it's a more guitar oriented version, but it's just so bland and it's soulless, and it has nothing to it really that what makes the original great. The song sounds basically like the original as far as just like the basics of the song, but oh, it's so sterile. And that song, actually, that version of it, to me kind of represents everything that was wrong with music in the 80s. And it makes me appreciate the original even more. There's so many different parts to this song and so many different kind of facets to it, and all of them sort of equal what made disco great. Just like what the pseudo echo kind of equals what made 80s music bad.
And this, this really is the end of the line for the disco era as we know it. So Donna Summer would have another big hit in 1980, and that's probably going to be on my list. But really, this is about it as far as classic disco music is concerned. This was the last hurrah. Now, dance music certainly didn't go away. It kind of slipped back to where it started, which was in the clubs. Certainly in the early 80s, this music was still very popular in that arena. And then it would kind of resurface as a different animal, but it never really went away. It was still alive, and it's still alive.
Yeah, it just kind of morphed, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're right. This is one where you definitely would still consider this disco. It has the sound. It's on the Casablanca label. It basically has everything that kind of encompass what disco was, but it's just at the end of it, at the tail end. Yeah. And it's a great way to go out with disco, I think.
Sure. It's pointing the way forward. It's harkening back a bit where it seems like, wow, really disco? We're going to do another disco song in 1980. Well, it's showing you what this music is going to become: more electronic, more mechanized, for good or for bad, and mainly for bad, in my opinion, although there's still a lot of great electronic music to come. But what made disco special for me isn't the machines, it's the people playing the instruments. And I can't really say when I turned a corner on this song, because I hated it when I was a kid. I didn't like it at all. And this was a disco fan. I was a disco kid. Loved Casey and the Sunshine Band. But at some point, the light went on. I just got the genius of it. And I think it's the vocal. The vocal is outstanding.
When I went and listened to this song recently, for this episode, I had a new appreciation even for it. I've always kind of liked it. I've always thought, it's kind of fun, and I like to sing along with it. It's got a great sing-alongable chorus, and I never disliked it, but I was able to really kind of listen closely and hear it has more merit to it than I originally thought. I can kind of understand why you just kind of wrote it off initially.
If I had to pin it down for my 10, 11-year-old self, and again, you look at the songs that I mentioned, like Coming Up, the studio version, which is very spare. Pop music, which is it's the minimalism. I guess I was more into bigger production values.
Yeah. And this is pretty minimalistic, although it does have more to it than I think a lot of the other ones that you mentioned. But you kind of have to listen more closely to hear those things.
Yeah.
It's easy to kind of just take it as the chorus or take it as the very basic, lyrics and nothing to it there. But there's more going on, I think.
I will say this before we sign off about Steven Greenberg. What motivated him to write the lyric was, he's like, I'm a soul music fan, and there's just nothing happening in this town. It's just vanilla. It's all vanilla. I'm like, dude, do you not get out much? Flight Time, Prince had already had a couple of albums.
Prince was already around at this time. Yeah.
Didn't Dirty Mind come out in 1980 or around then?
Yeah.
Come on, man. Where are you hiding? There's plenty of soulful stuff happening in the Twin Cities.
He probably was hiding his little suburban neighborhood.
That's right. All right, so we've got our first two songs of 1980. We didn't even think about this before we picked them. Funkytown spent 4 weeks on the charts in May to June of 1980, and the song that knocked it off the top spot was none other than Paul McCartney's Coming Up. So,
oh, wow, okay.
To refresh our guidelines for picking songs for the playlist, we have at least one major global hit that Sheryl and I will choose, one each, and then at least one other U.S. number one hit that Sheryl and I will each choose one, and then we will pad out the rest of the songs for the year with our personal favorites. So now we're building up into the 80s. We're going to pick 16 songs total for 1980. So you got our first two, and we're going with hits here in the first episode. I will say this. You look back over our previous episodes starting in 72 through 79, the vast majority of the songs were familiar songs, top 40 hits.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna veer off the path a little more here in 1980. There's gonna be a couple of songs that are gonna be unfamiliar to a lot of people, but are very, very meaningful to me, and I think would appeal to a broad audience if they were exposed to them. So,
yeah,
I don't know about you, but just a little advance warning.
yeah. I don't think so. I feel like most of the ones I've mentioned to you already are definitely well known, and some of them are hits too. But I find that I tend to go more toward the albums that are less known. And I may be doing that slightly this time. I already know what my album is going to be for this year.
I'm pretty sure I know what my album's going to be too. So, Funkytown by Lip Sync, and coming up, the live in Glasgow, Scotland version by Paul McCartney, which was the number one hit in the United States. Our first two additions to 1980, and we're glad to be back, and hopefully not too long before our next episode, and we hope you'll join us then. Until then, I'm Matt.
I'm Sheryl.
And this is Matt and Sheryl's Gen Excellent Playlist. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Take care.